Please welcome to The Late Show, Andrew McCarthy.
Hello.
Welcome to the show.
Thanks very much.
Earlier this year, I had on your fellow Brat Packian, Demi Moore.
Yeah.
And we mentioned the San Elmo's fire.
A truck flipped over on I-80 in Wyoming in July 2025, and inside was Andrew McCarthy. He survived with minor injuries, but this wasn't even the most dangerous thing he had done that year. The 80s heartthrob, who once couldn't finish a single scene sober, had reinvented himself so completely that people didn't recognize his name anymore. He walked 500 miles to fix his broken relationship with his son. He drove 10,000 miles interviewing strangers, and now he's making a bold prediction about 2028 that sounds impossible. Today, we're revealing what Andrew McCarthy really does for a living now, and why Hollywood can't stop talking about it. Andrew Thomas McCarthy came into the world on November 29, 1962, at West Jersey Hospital in Westfield, New Jersey. He was raised in an Irish Catholic home, the third of 4 boys, and the house ran on hard work and routine. His father, John Andrew McCarthy, was building a chain of 7-Eleven franchises. His mother, Adrienne Ellis, worked as a personal assistant. So even early on, Andrew grew up around grown-up pressure, the kind that sits in a room even when nobody talks about it. Then the family's life shifted fast. In 1967, when Andrew was only 5, his father's business took off in a big way, and the story in the home became money and momentum. The move to Bernardsville followed, into a mansion, and the franchise valuation was said to have hit $2 million. It looked like the kind of childhood people imagine is easy. Yet the thing Andrew kept reaching for was not the mansion. It was the stage. He did not wait for permission either. By the time he was 6, he was putting on backyard plays for neighbors and charging 25 cents to get in. It sounds small, almost funny, but it also shows what he was already learning. Attention is work, and work can become a kind of safety. By 1973, he was 11, and the acting dream started to turn real. He landed a bit part in his school's Bye Bye Birdie, and for a kid, that first taste can feel like oxygen. Still, that same year also cracked something open at home. On March 14, 1973, the story goes that a private detective exposed his father's 18-month affair with a secretary, and the marriage nearly broke apart. Suddenly, Andrew was not just learning lines. He was watching adults fall apart. Later, he would talk about how that time changed what he believed about family, and how it left a mark on the way he understood love, loyalty, and the quiet damage people carry. Even with that chaos, he kept pushing forward, almost like moving was the only way to stay steady. In the summer of 1975, when he was 12, he trained at the Circle Repertory Theater Lab in New York City under Marshall Mason. He was one of 22 students chosen for a showcase, and in that room, a new door opened. A scout from the Ford modeling agency spotted him and offered him a modeling job. It paid $800, which was huge for a 12-year-old in 1975, and people later pointed out it would be over $10,000 today when adjusted for inflation. That money was more than money. It was proof. Someone outside the family was saying, "You can do this." That confidence carried him into a bigger leap. In September 1976, at 13, he left public school and started commuting to the Professional Children's School in New York City. The trip was 45 miles each way from Bernardsville, and it was not some glamorous ride into a dream. It was long mornings, long nights, and a world where kids were already competing like adults. Then, on October 3, 1976, he was beaten by older students who targeted him for his pretty boy look, and his nose was fractured. That kind of moment does not just hurt your face. It changes how you walk through rooms. He later spoke about it as a lesson in toughness, and also as a first close look at how cruel people can get when they sense somebody is different. Still, the industry kept pulling him in. In January 1977, at 14, he signed with Elite Model Management. On paper, it was a rocket. By the end of 1978, it was said he had appeared on the covers of 17 major magazines and was earning about $45,000 a year, which is a wild number for a teenager in the late 1970s. Yet even while the magazines were stacking up, there was pressure behind the scenes that did not feel like success. McCarthy has said his agent pushed him toward topless shoots when he was 15. He refused, and he has described being sidelined for 6 months after after that. In later years, Elite and its leadership would face public controversy and serious allegations about how young models were treated, including claims that underage models were pushed into unsafe situations and that wealthy clients were involved in exploitative behavior, with some stories even throwing around numbers like $50,000 for an introduction. Those details have been debated and argued over for years, but the feeling underneath them is what matters here. A teenager learns that glamour can come with a price tag you did not agree to pay. By 1979, he was 16 and he wanted the stage again, the place that felt more honest than a photo shoot. On October 12, 1979, he made his off-Broadway debut as Joey in The Boys of Winter at Circle Repertory Company. The run lasted 37 shows and he earned $275 per week. It was real work, real rhythm, and for a moment it looked like the clean path forward. Then another ugly lesson arrived. On November 2, 1979, McCarthy has said that during rehearsal, the director physically assaulted him on stage. He walked out after that. Some people might call it quitting, but for a young actor, leaving like that can also be the first time you choose your own safety over somebody else's power. Time moved, and he kept building, even with bruises that did not show. On April 20th, 1983, at 20, he got his Broadway breakthrough as Tom in Neil Simon's Brighton Beach Memoirs. The show ran 592 performances, and his weekly pay jumped to $1,200. That sounds like the dream arriving right on schedule. Yet even there, the darkness did not stay outside the theater doors. Reports tied to McCarthy's later accounts say his co-star John Polito harassed him regularly during the run, and that the situation became serious enough that on May 18, 1983, McCarthy filed a formal complaint with SAG. So even at the height of a career milestone, he was still dealing with the same old pattern. Talent gets you in the room. It does not automatically protect you once you are there. While Brighton Beach Memoirs was still running, Hollywood noticed. He filmed his first movie role in Class in 1983, playing a punk kid, and he earned $50,000 for 3 weeks of filming in Chicago. Industry stories say director Louis John Carlino praised him heavily, even calling him a once-in-generation face, and that McCarthy went through 14 chemistry tests before landing the part. Whether every detail lands perfectly or not, the bigger truth is simple. He was suddenly being tested and measured like a product, and he was passing. But choices started to carry heavier consequences now. On June 5, 1983, he turned down the role of T.C. Munn in Risky Business because he worried about the sex scene stigma. The role went to Joe Pantoliano. The film became a major hit, and McCarthy later admitted he regretted saying no. That is how fast it happens in this business. One fear today can become a shadow tomorrow. Then came the storm years, the ones people still whisper about when they talk about 1980s Hollywood. Saint Elmo's Fire began filming on February 6, 1985, in Washington, D.C. McCarthy played Kevin Dolan's, filmed for 62 days, and earned $750,000. The movie became a defining Brat Pack moment, but the behind-the-scenes story was not all friendship and laughter. McCarthy later explored this in his documentary Brats, and within those conversations, there is the set incident dated March 14, 1985, during a love scene with Ali Sheedy, where Emilio Estevez reportedly punched McCarthy. The way McCarthy and others have described it, the tension was not only about one scene, it was pressure, ego, insecurity, and young actors being turned into a headline before they even knew how to handle it. Pretty in Pink followed close behind. It was shot from April 22nd to June 18, 1985, in Los Angeles. McCarthy played Blaine and was paid $1 million. Then a test screening on July 9, 1985, changed everything. The story goes that test audiences did not buy the character, calling him wimpy, and director Howard Deutsch ordered reshoots, 27 scenes, done in a single day. Deutsch later said McCarthy had lost weight and cut his hair for a stage play, which forced him into a wig that became infamous. People called it a nightmare. The crew was shocked, yet the machine does not slow down for anyone. It just rewrites you and keeps rolling. The final film eventually grossed $40 million, and it is strange to think that a huge part of that success rested on one frantic day and a bad wig. Then, right in the middle of that chaos, a label was born that would cling to him for decades. On June 10, 1985, New York Magazine published David Blum's cover story that coined Brat Pack. McCarthy later described reading it at 3 a.m. after the St. Elmo's Fire premiere party, calling his agent in tears and saying, "My career's over." Blum film would later say he never meant to harm them, but the label stuck anyway, and it stopped being cute fast. It turned into a joke, then a sneer, then a wall. McCarthy wrote in Brat, an 80s story, that it made top directors less likely to take them seriously, and he has mentioned names like Martin Scorsese and Steven Spielberg as the kind of people who might keep their distance once the label hardened. And just as that article hit, another blow landed. Heaven Help Us, filmed in January 1985 and released in February 1985, flopped at the box office with about $1.5 million. McCarthy later blamed the Brat Pack stain for the way the industry looked at him, and he told Variety on August 3, 1985, it's career suicide. That is not just frustration, that is panic. Because once the public decides you are a type, you start to feel trapped inside your own face. Around that same time, his personal life was moving fast too. He met Carol Schneider at the Pretty in Pink wrap party on July 20th, 1985. They fell hard. He proposed on November 29th, 1985, his birthday, after 4 months. It sounds romantic until you feel what was happening underneath. McCarthy has tied that period to the pressure of fame and the way it can feed addiction, and he has said the signs were already showing even then. Career choices kept coming, and not all of them landed. One story places him turning down the role of Goose in Top Gun on January 15, 1986, out of fear of being boxed in, though accounts around casting can vary depending on who is telling it. What is clearer is what happened next with Fresh Horses in 1988. The film grossed about $3.1 million, and it did not lift him. It weighed him down. The industry loves a rise, but it watches a stumble even harder. Mannequin changed the volume again. The film was shot from February to May 1986, made about $42 million on a $6 million budget, and McCarthy earned $2 million. It should have been a clean win, yet tabloids love mess more than movies. There were rumors of an affair with co-star Kim Cattrall and stories about a leaked date, April 12, 1987, that supposedly turned private heat into public scandal. Those reports have floated around for years, and the details depend on the source, but the result was real either way. More attention, more judgment, more pressure. Then came Less Than Zero in 1987, where he played a character drowning in addiction. Some accounts claim he pushed method acting too far, even alleging real cocaine use, a shocking number like 14 overdoses, and a hospitalization on May 22, 1987, with a heart rate of 180 BPM. Those are extreme claims, and they are not consistently documented across reliable sources. But what McCarthy himself has been clear about is the broader truth. His real life was sliding closer to the darkness he was playing on screen, and it stopped feeling like acting. Weekend at Bernie's arrived next, filmed from June to October 1988 in the Hamptons, and it became a major hit, often reported as over $100 million worldwide. Behind the laughs, stories from that period describe heavy drinking and serious instability, including claims that he disappeared into blackout stretches and that people around the production tried to cover for him to keep things moving. Even if every detail cannot be pinned down perfectly, the direction is obvious. The success was loud, and the pain was getting louder too, just in private. On August 29, 1988, he married Carol Schneider in Ardsley, New York. The honeymoon did not get to stay a honeymoon. Reshoots for Weekend at Bernie's cut into their time, and their first major fight was reportedly over a $4,200 bar tab. That number says everything, not just about money, about appetite, about limits, about somebody who cannot stop once he starts. From 1989 to 1991, the slide got harder to hide. He took a run of projects that did not carry the old spotlight, including multiple direct-to-video thrillers. His addiction, by his own later accounts, was getting worse, and he described shaking hands, violent hangovers, and a life that felt lost. There is also a story dated October 3, 1991, about him auditioning for The Joy Luck Club and being rejected for having boozy breath, with the role going to Russell Wong. That specific detail is often repeated in tabloid-style retellings, and it is hard to verify cleanly, but the message is clear. The work was slipping away because the control was slipping away. He has described a rock-bottom moment, waking up convulsing and sobbing on a bathroom floor, finally realizing he could not keep living like that. Then came the moment that forced the truth into the open. On March 14, 1994, at 31, he was rushed to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center after a 3-day binge, and he later described severe severe liver damage, and doctors warning him that he could be dead within 6 months if he did not stop. He has also shared numbers like a bilirubin level said to be 8.2 times normal and weight loss of 33 pounds in 2 months. He used words like walking corpse. That is not a dramatic line for effect. That is a person finally seeing himself clearly and not liking what he saw. Even after that, the body does not bounce back overnight. His last major film role is often described as Mulholland Falls, filmed in August 1995 and released in 1996. Accounts from that time talk about intense withdrawal, shaking, and a struggle to focus, with one claim saying it could take up to 47 takes per day to get through lines. Director Lee Tamahori is sometimes quoted as calling him a walking corpse on set, which echoes McCarthy's own language from his health crisis. The film received criticism, it flopped, and the leading man era did not return the way people expected. Between 1996 and 2000, Andrew McCarthy found himself in a strange kind of comfort that did not feel comforting at all. He starred in 12 Hallmark Channel movies in those 4 years, including The Christmas Gift, and by the time that run ended, he had made a total of $1.2 million from those projects. On paper, it looked safe, it looked steady, but the parts kept repeating. He was often the sad dad, or the emotionally distant father, the same face in a different living room, saying the same kind of lines with a different holiday in the background. Over time, that sameness started to drain him. So even while the checks were coming in, something heavier was building. He kept moving through sets with that quiet, tired feeling, and it did not lift. Then, in February 1998, after persistent sadness and fatigue that would not let go, his therapist diagnosed him with clinical depression. That moment put a name on what he had been carrying. It also made the truth harder to ignore. Money was not fixing his life. It was only making it easier to stay stuck, and the deeper issue was already there, waiting under the surface. He first walked into Alcoholics Anonymous on March 29, 1992, hoping that would be the start of a clean line forward. Instead, the line kept bending. By the year 2000, he had relapsed 17 times. Each time it stole something from him: confidence, trust, time, and the worst part was how easily the work itself could pull the string. That same year, everything came to a head in a way he could not hide. On July 14, 2000, he was working on the indie film Gossip when director Kenneth Branagh fired him mid-shoot. The story that followed was ugly. The scene took 23 takes, and McCarthy was described as visibly hungover, mumbling lines, throwing the whole rhythm off. The firing did not just hurt his pride. It put a spotlight on him in the worst way. It told people he was unreliable. It told him the same thing. Still, even that was not the bottom. On October 12, 2000, he guest starred on Law and Order, and the scene required him to act drunk in a bar. He went for realism, and the realism hit back. The craving came hard. After filming, he slipped into a 72-hour blackout, disappeared from his hotel, and missed work commitments. When that fog finally cleared, what was left was fear. Not just fear of losing jobs, but fear of how fragile his recovery really was, and how one scene could push him off the edge. Then, after all that chaos, something surprising happened. In April 2001, he made a comeback of a different kind. Not as an actor, but as a model. He landed the cover of Travel Plus Leisure in a shoot set in Bali, Indonesia, and he earned $25,000 for the assignment. It was his first non-acting gig in 2 decades, but the real win was quieter than the paycheck. He completed the shoot completely sober. For him, that mattered more than the photo. Bali did something else, too. It woke up a love for travel that would later turn into a whole new identity. That new identity did not arrive smoothly either. In January 2003, he took on a brutal 19-day solo trek up Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania. Alone, tired, and stripped down to the basics, he journaled and wrote one line that said everything about his mental state. Acting killed my soul. He came back with a need to reinvent himself, but wanting change is not the same as earning it. So, when he tried to step into travel writing, the door did not open right away. On June 5, 2003, he submitted his first travel piece to Esquire, and it was rejected. That one stung, yet he stayed with it, kept writing, and kept pushing until the new path became real. Years later, the reinvention got even bigger. In August 2009, he stepped behind the camera for a 7-day shoot on Law and Order SVU. The episode was Users, and it aired on October 10, 2009. For a first-time TV director, the pace was intense, but the reports afterward were simple. No ego, no clashes, just just work. The episode itself dealt with addiction and manipulation, and the fact that he could guide that kind of story without turning it into noise helped people take him seriously. It was not a celebrity side quest. It looked like commitment. Then the work kept stacking. On January 12, 2010, he was named editor-at-large for National Geographic, and the writing life that began with rejection started earning real respect. In March 2012, his piece Santiago to Sea showed the kind of voice he was building, and by 2015, he had won 6 Lowell Thomas Awards. Those awards did not just reward travel stories. They rewarded the way he could make a reader feel what it was like to be out there, uncertain, moving anyway. At the same time, the travel did not always stay romantic. His memoir, The Longest Way Home, came out in June 2012, and it included a harrowing trek through Ecuador in 2008. On day 12 of that journey, he was hit with malaria, and his fever reached 104 degrees pointers. He had to rest for days in a remote village, weak and shaken, still trying to push through because quitting felt like losing. That story landed with people because it was not polished, it was honest. And while the writing world was opening, television was opening too. On March 22, 2013, he shot his first Orange is the New Black episode, Lesbian Apologies, Season 1, Episode 4. Creator Genji Kohan hired him after reviewing his dailies, and the reputation followed him. Calm, focused, no drama. Between 2013 and 2019, he directed 15 episodes of the series, handling scenes that required both tension and humor without forcing either one. The show went on to sit at a 98% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, and his steady hand helped shape the tone people remember. By November 18, 2014, he was also directing The Blacklist, starting with Season 2, Episode 9, The Golem. Over several seasons, he directed 26 episodes. His style leaned cinematic, with tight framing and pressure in the quiet moments. There was even a memo dated December 3, 2014, where James Spader praised the intense close-ups, calling them the scariest close-ups he had ever seen. That kind of feedback travels fast in the industry. Even so, the past still kept trying to stick to him. He talked openly about an Emmy snub, especially after directing acclaimed Orange is the New Black episodes in 2014. On July 15, 2015, he discussed it with The Hollywood Reporter and blamed part of it on what he called the Brat Pack ghost. The idea that some people still saw him as a teen movie face, not a serious director. It was a familiar fight. Work hard, grow up, change lanes, and still feel somebody pulling you back by an old label. Then another lane opened again, this time through fiction. After his divorce in 2016, he wrote a young adult novel in just 9 weeks. The book was Just Fly Away, published on March 21, 2017. It hit the New York Times bestseller list at number 7 and sold over 250,000 copies in the first year. For people who only knew him from the 1980s, it was a surprise. For him, it probably felt like proof. He could still start over. He could still build something new. And the most personal rebuilding was not on a set or on a page. It was at home. His son, Sam, born in 1993, with ex-wife Carol Schneider, was estranged from him for years. The distance lasted 8 years, and the split deepened after a 2013 fight when Sam called him a deadbeat dad. Those words tend to echo, but in 2021, when McCarthy was 58 and Sam was 28, they finally reconciled. The turning point came during a 500-mile walk on the Camino de Santiago in Spain. Step after step, they talked through pain, regret, and silence, until the bond could breathe again. McCarthy later chronicled that journey in his memoir, Walking with Sam, and in May 2023, he shared more of that month-long trek, showing how awkward and tender healing can be when two people are trying again. Then, as if he still had unfinished business with the past, he went back to the Brat Pack story itself. His documentary Brats became a raw look at what that label did to him and others, tracing it back to the June 1985 New York Magazine article that branded them. He said the label helped trigger a 12-year audition drought for him, and the film shows him reaching out to old friends like Rob Lowe, Demi Moore, and Ali Sheedy. The documentary premiered at Tribeca on June 7, 2024, then released on Hulu in June 2024, and it landed with people because it did not feel like nostalgia. It felt like a wound finally being cleaned. There was even a 4-hour interview with Demi Moore on March 12, 2024, where she broke down while talking about the trauma and what it did to her self-worth. The film later sat at an 85% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. In another shocking moment, Rob Lowe admitted he punched McCarthy at a party in 1985. A messy glossy flash of how much pressure and insecurity lived behind the smiles. And even after all that, he kept drawing lines in the sand. In October 2024, he turned down a $5 million offer to act again as Blaine in a Pretty in Pink sequel. In a Variety interview dated November 1st, 2024, he said he would direct the film, but he would never act as Blaine again. It was a clean refusal, and it said a lot. Some roles feel like cages, even when people call them classics. He also shared a detail fans still talk about, that the original Pretty in Pink ending was booed by test audiences, which led to a last-minute rewrite, and he had to wear a wig for the reshoot because he had cut his hair for another movie. By January 2025, the travel side of his life was still expanding. He launched a 12-part travel plus leisure series called A Song for Ireland, driving solo more than 2,100 miles across Ireland. The journey began in Galway, moved through remote villages, historic pubs, and the Kerry coast, and even included a moment in Listowel where he was welcomed into a McCarthy family home, sitting with tea and fairy cakes while stories and crests covered the walls. It sounded small, but that is often where meaning hides. Then, between June and August 2025, he went even bigger with a road trip for his book Who Needs Friends. He drove over 10,000 miles across 22 U.S. states and interviewed 47 men about male friendship. He met cowboys, musicians, teenagers, and lonely men who had not said certain words out loud in years. But the trip also turned dangerous. On July 19, 2025, while driving on I-80 in Wyoming, his truck skidded on ice, flipped over, and was totaled. He survived with minor injuries, and that moment became a pivot in the story because it forced the same old question again. What matters when the road suddenly tries to take you out? In July 2025, he also filmed a voice role at Pinewood Studios for the Marvel film Vision Quest. James Spader returned to voice Ultron, and McCarthy's involvement was described as bringing a fresh emotional layer. The film is set for a 2026 premiere. Beyond that, he is preparing an Ireland bookland for 2027, built around an 800-kilometer trek along the wild Atlantic Way, continuing the pattern he has lived for years now. Walk into the unknown, write it down, turn it into something that makes sense. By December 2025, his net worth was reported at $12 million, built through acting, directing, book publishing, and travel journalism. He split time between New York and Ireland, and he was said to reject 92% of professional offers, choosing only what felt personal. Then came the boldest line of all, a prediction that he would receive an Oscar nomination for directing by 2028. Whether people believe it or not, the point is clear. He is done shrinking himself.